Most leaders, when they decide it is time to get serious about AI, go shopping. New tools, new platforms, new vendors. What many of them don't do first is look at what they already have. Call transcripts sitting in a CRM that no one reads, exit interview text that gets filed and forgotten, customer feedback that gets aggregated into a score and never opened again, engagement surveys, and the comments that people give that HR reviews once a year, if that. That data is not inert, it's full of signals, and most organizations have never pointed an AI lens at it. Today's guest has spent years helping founders and business leaders do exactly that. Joelle Irwin is a fractional CMO, AI advisor, and a certified responsible AI leader based in Montreal. She has been accountable for 70% of ARR at a global SaaS company, and now she coaches leaders on how to build AI into their growth engines responsibly. Her starting point is almost always the same. Before you build or buy anything, look at what the data you already own is telling you. That is what we are talking about today. Joelle, welcome to Tides.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Shweta. I'm so happy to be here today.
So maybe we can get started by exploring your experience working with founders and business leaders. What have you seen when we look at AI with the lens of data? What have you seen organizations, what data do organizations already have that they are simply not using? What is it that they're sitting on, which is right in front of them, but being ignored?
100%. Yeah. So I usually like to classify data as quantitative and qualitative data. Most companies are already using a lot of quantitative data. I would also say that not all companies have a full view of everything in a nice structured way, but they're using it most of the time in segments. They might have the marketing data from Google Analytics. They might have data if it's like a B2B SaaS product. They would have in-app data. They might even have like billing system data, things like that. The thing that people are not using is the qualitative data. Yes, there are interviews that are done. Yes, there are surveys that are done, but that can also be a lot of data to sift through. And prior to AI, it was a lot of work and it took a lot of time. And it was one of those things that sometimes would also get left to, we'll do it later when we have time. And so right now, there's a huge opportunity to not only use the quantitative data that you have, but also qualitative data that you have from call transcripts, from emails that are going to customer service, potentially even from Reddit threads where people are talking about your product or brand, or even review sites where people are talking about your service, your products, and your brand. So there's data everywhere. It's how you use it and how you put it together in a smart way so that you can actually solve your users' problems and help them achieve what they want to achieve.
Absolutely. Leaders tend to reach for new AI tools before they've actually looked at all the data that they are sitting on or they own, both quantitative and qualitative. From your perspective, is this the reality that you're also seeing? And if it is, what is driving that instinct to jump on getting a new tool versus looking at what our data is telling us in terms of signals before we even get into build, buy, or redesign discussions?
100%. I think there's a few things. So FOMO is a big part of it. It's the fear of missing out. People are chatting away on LinkedIn at conferences and meetings about how they're using AI to solve problems. There's also pressure sometimes from boards or investors when you work if you work at a startup or if you're working in a regulated industry, you will have people weighing in on what you should and shouldn't be doing. And there's also, I would say, pressure that comes from within the company. So sometimes the leadership might be slow to move, but the people inside the company are already using the tools. And they have to start making fast decisions on, do we allow all these tools? Do we only allow one tool? And so the conversation shifts from what can we do that's useful to what are we doing? We need to do something now. Like which tools do we need rather than what problems do we actually need to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say that are the biggest risks or challenges with that approach? If they make that choice, what are the kind of risks that they'll have to mitigate or course correct down the road?
Yeah, I think that's a very loaded question because there's so many things.
Mm-hmm.
But at a high level, I would say the biggest challenge or the problem that I see is the security risk.
Mm-hmm.
People don't educate their teams internally or themselves on security risks. I've seen many people deploy something that online that is not protected properly, and you can open up yourself to vulnerability if you're using like IDE, if you're using like a platform like Cursor or a tool that'll help you learn how to code and build something. You could also be releasing your own code out into the wild. It could be proprietary code that you shouldn't be. Like there's things that at a security level, there's many risks.
Yeah.
The other thing is also you are also potentially, if you don't educate your teams internally, you could also be risking privacy of the data of your customers and your clients. Like you have to make sure that you educate the people within your company to say, we need to scrub the data before we put it in. And
Yeah.
so steps are being missed
Mm-hmm.
when trying new tools like this without having guidelines or guardrails around it. So I think being thoughtful about your plan and your process before you dive in is important. So I would always recommend take a few minutes to I've seen one of my clients do this. They actually did an internal survey to ask people how they're using it, what they're using it for, what concerns they have, also like to talk about how they feel,
Mm-hmm.
what they feel like the risks are. So actually doing a survey internally could be useful.
Mm-hmm.
And then putting together some policies and guidelines for your teams could be really good right from the get-go before you start getting into buying or using many different tools.
Absolutely. Could you walk me through how you actually use AI to surface insights from first party data, which is our own internal organizational data? What does that process look like in practice? Maybe through an example.
Yeah, of course. So I know you have a framework and my framework kind of fits a little bit with yours. So what I generally like to do is look at the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So things that we do regularly, things that we know how to do, that's part of our expertise. Look at how often we do them, how much time those things take. You can also measure with impact, what's the impact of those tasks. And I like to add the annoyance factor, like how annoying is it to do those things? Do I really want to be spending my time doing those things? And I prioritize those things. So that's step one. Once you have an idea, taking that idea to concept is the first step. And you say like, okay, how am I gonna attack this? And you come up with a sort of like a hypothesis, and you can put together like an initial prompt, and you test it out in your chat. And once that works and it's good, you can move on to creating an agent. And then you test that out in real life type situations. You use it on a regular basis to iron out the kinks. Once that's done, then I start adding automation. I find a lot of people go straight from idea, I want to automate everything, but by doing so, you're introducing a lot of chaos into your life and a lot of poor quality output. So I like to use this flow and remind you what you call your framework.
Yeah, I call it the 3A thinking lens. How can AI help me augment the work that I do? Tease out what pieces are so black and white and repetitive that it doesn't make sense for a human. So we delegate and automate and give it to AI to do. And the third, we can completely redesign or adapt with AI.
Exactly. And so I'm very aligned with your process and thinking. And I also think that all of everything that we create is living and evolving. I can never say something is done
Yeah.
because things change, the models themselves change. And with the
Mhm.
model change, sometimes what you've had in the past doesn't work anymore. Or if you
Exactly.
switch to a different tool altogether, the output will be completely different. So being able to constantly adapt and evolve that way, I think is really important. It's a change, a shift of way of thinking.
That's right. If we have both quantitative and qualitative data, based on what I'm hearing you say, you can make much more better informed decisions and choices around what is broken in the process. Where are the friction points? How can we redesign the value that we've promised to our customers differently now that we have an intelligence? I don't even call it technology, intelligence as powerful as AI to help us rethink delivering the customer value.
100%. And if you think of it this way, surveys and interviews, people are in a state, they're in a, they feel like they're being judged, right?
Mhm.
So when a team is doing those interviews and surveys, they're getting, I'm going to say, slightly biased responses because they know they're being judged. Whereas if you're taking, let's say, emails or transcripts or potentially even Reddit threads, people are way more free to express how they're really feeling. You'll get actual real behavioral data that makes your strategies that much stronger because you're getting the real story, you know?
Are you seeing organizations spend energy in the qualitative or the digital footprint or that passive data or digital exhaust? Some people call it that too, that we're all generating, whether we want it or not.
Right. I mean, that's I think a harder question to answer. Like I feel like sometimes people have good intentions but aren't actually doing it as much as they should. Do you feel that too?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it's not one reason. There might be multiple reasons for organizations not putting their energy towards mining digital exhaust.
Exactly. And I think, and I say this to many of my clients whenever they're implementing AI or using AI in their processes and systems, that one of the most important things you need to do first is talk to a lawyer and update your terms and conditions, and also speak to your clients about how you're using it and how it impacts them before you start heavily using it, because they need to feel comfortable too. So the same thing would apply inside an organization. If if you're using their data, number
Yeah.
one, if they're being monitored in some way, they need to know about it. Two, if you're using AI to then filter that data and process that data and develop insights from that data, it's important to communicate that in a way that people feel comfortable and could potentially maybe even opt out, like, or opt in. I don't know what the there's a lot to unpack here. So we're dealing with people, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to make sure that people feel safe, especially in a work environment.
Yeah. That's right. Because I mean, if you look at it from a employee's perspective and within an organizational context, I mean, if we start pointing AI to make sense of performance data, for example, and people don't know how people are being promoted or what data and how AI is used to make sense of that data to not only make promotion decisions but also salary increases and things like that, it can really go the wrong way really quickly. If nothing, you lose credibility and trust with your employees.
I mean, beyond that, most of these tools, the way that they were created, there's so much bias already baked in. And so as you're developing a tool to help you with something like that, how do you mitigate that bias? You need to be really thoughtful about how you put that together and test it before you even start using it
Yeah,
to
yeah,
make sure that you're being fair and transparent with everyone about how it works.
absolutely. Have you seen any practices that organizations are using to mitigate bias with data? Like, how do
So
they go about doing that?
I can tell you how I do that. I actually bake into, I'd say, all of my agents. I have some wording that I use, and I think, can I pull up a quick example? Let me see if I
Yeah,
can find something quick. Um,
absolutely.
but I have things to mitigate against bias and also error handling to avoid the hallucinations,
Yeah,
because it's so easy to fall down that trap. Here, I have something here. So this is an example, and this is something I actually pulled from a course that I took last year. And I loved it. And I may have edited it slightly since then. So I have things like when analyzing, please use a structured methodology for sorting, analyzing feedback to ensure consistency and completeness. Try your best to recognize and actively mitigate biases that might influence analysis, such as confirmation bias, recency bias, or selection bias. So if you can actually put that language in your prompts, that
Yeah.
makes all the difference. And then I also say things like always prioritize feedback that offers clear insights into potential actions or decisions. That way you're focusing the data a little bit more, because with Reddit, you will get things that are completely left field.
Yeah.
And so you want to try and keep it bit centered. And the other area I was talking about is the error handling. For error handling, I have things for critical errors, or like I qualify them as different types of errors and what to do in each scenario.
Mm.
So if, for example, there's no data to support a question,
Mhm.
they'll come back to me and tell me, don't start making stuff up.
That's a really nice one because if you don't, then I'm sure I have lived through it in a very simple way as well. Like if I'm talking to Claude or Chat GPT, if it doesn't know something, it will cook up information and still respond to me with something. It's never come to me and said, I don't know.
Exactly. And then I have another one that says, like, if you found some of the answer, but you're missing XYZ,
Hmm.
tell me that this is the answer. These are the sources, but I don't have this information, so that it's giving you what you need to know to say, is this accurate, or am I missing something?
Yeah.
So like as long as you have these guardrails in, like, built within, you're able to then um, improve upon
Yeah.
the system instructions, the prompts with each iteration.
Yeah, absolutely. Typically, when we get into automation and delegate to AI so that it's doing work on its own, these guardrails need to be set when we are configuring the agents as well? And if yes, then who is putting those guardrails? Is it IT? Is it HR? Should it be the combination of both? What would you recommend?
So I would say, generally speaking, I love the idea of the subject matter experts being heavily involved, because that's whose work is being augmented, right?
Yeah.
If you bring in a technical person that doesn't understand how to do the thing, they're not
Hmm.
going to be able to understand the nuances of the challenges that you're facing on a day to day basis, right? So I think it's important to educate the people who have that expertise in house. And it doesn't necessarily need to be an engineer or a developer or an IT person or a data person. I think it's really about educating the people that are doing the work and how to augment their own tasks. So, yes, it needs to be the HR person in this scenario.
Yeah.
And I think I think having a collaboration also with the technical person there to help educate, maybe, or maybe bringing in an expert who can consult with the whole company to build the map of how everything works together, and build the infrastructure for collaboration between all the different teams. And I think also, like, I'm saying that's the person that's owning it, right? But having a data person or a technology person involved to educate the person on the risks, the security, the privacy, the things that you can do to mitigate I'm going to say, the, like, data leakage or, like, security risks. I think it's important that they're involved in the conversation, but I think the actual development of that process and workflow, it's going to come from the brain of the person that's doing the work on the day to day.
Love it. How do we leverage data to make an informed choice around whether process should be automated, augmented, or redesigned completely? Augmentation is simple and straightforward. Like I do research, for example, and I'm now going to lean on AI to make sense of the data that I've collected to do research. But when it comes to automation and adaptation specifically, how can data help us make those choices around what parts of process should be given to an agent, for example, or what parts of the process should be completely remapped?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet I was mentioning earlier, the process for prioritization. So we want to make sure we understand the tasks that you do on a regular basis, how long those take, how often you do them, the impact, and the annoyance factor. And by doing that exercise, you can then prioritize the things that are most important to you. You focus on your tasks. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing or what you want to be doing. You really need to do the things you know how to do inside and out. By doing that, one, you're taking a lot of um, I'm going to say the cognitive load off because you know how to do the thing. So at this point, you're just like, you're doing the augmentation. Once you start noticing that it works really well and um, you feel like the output's like 90% there, that's when you're like, okay, I can start adding an automation to this. Before that, I would not automate anything. And if it's not something that you're doing on a very regular basis, it doesn't make sense to automate it.
Yeah.
Putting the time and investment to automate something that isn't like recurring like that is a waste of time,
Yeah.
right? So I think that that priority matrix works for pretty much everything and anything. And then if, for example, there's somebody else on another team who's doing the same thing, you could see, here, check out my agent or my automation. And then you can start circulating it around the business.
You haven't worked in HR, but I wanted your perspective as an outsider in and on the receiving end of all that HR delivers to an employee. From your perspective, where are the opportunities for HR to be thinking about integrating AI? Like which macro processes? And if you feel like we can go into one of the ones that you talk about and probably see how we can talk a little bit more deeper in that area.
Yeah, 100%. I love, so I've worked at several companies over the years where I've started on day one and there was like zero onboarding and it's like Shark Tank, like I've lived that
Go
experience.
figure it.
I've also been in companies where they have a full onboarding documentation with the things I'm supposed to do 30, 60, 90 days. Every company is very different. I love the idea of an onboarding survey or maybe a conversation where you have a transcript where you learn a bit about the person and you find out things like how do you like to receive feedback? What uh like questions like do you have any challenges? Like the personal type questions that to get to know the person quickly, just to understand how they work. So doing something like that at the beginning, um, let's say you tell the person, we're going to transcribe this and we're going to take these notes and then we're going to use them to improve your overall experience. So let's say, for example, there's an accessibility issue. You could automatically send a ticket to IT to say, can you please order this equipment for the, or can you send an email to this person to ask them what they need for their specific situation? You know what I mean?
That is true personalization because now, and removing friction from an employee's first 90-day experience in an organization. I love that example.
Right. Or I can give you some more examples. So I've also I led production at an agency. And so I kept having these same conversations over and over again because my team needed very specific computers and software to do their jobs. And they're like, they just need a MacBook Air. And I'm like, they don't need a MacBook Air. They need a MacBook Pro. They're running video software. They're running Photoshop. And so I'd same conversation over and over and over again. So at that point, now there's a lot of systems where the manager will say, I need this and this and this, whatever. And you're like filling out a survey. What happens after that survey? It gets sent to IT and sometimes they're like, they don't need this software. I'm just going to send them this. So I think there's something there that could be nicely automated and there could be potential like additional, if you're in a really large organization, additional information that says this team requires this bandwidth of internet and needs this cable, or they need access to Photoshop. So we need to add more subscriptions, like just things to
Yeah.
understand the overall picture. But then
Yeah.
also that information also needs to go to finance.
Yes.
right? So it's the flow of information through the business that I feel like could be improved very easily through automation. And that's not
Absolutely.
necessarily AI, that's more automation.
Yeah. But I'm sure somewhere in this automation, AI can help replace the judgment call that probably a human would make, that AI can now make. Okay, route this information here, route that information there, send this information there. Is that how you see agents
Yes.
replacing humans in that kind of choosing the path based on the
And
information that's flowing into them?
yes, and also if there's, for example, a piece of information that's missing, that can easily be an automated email that or a chat that goes to that person that says, "We're missing this information. Can you please either validate or provide more?" And then it goes to the right person.
Yeah, yeah. Where else would you see HR can do better in terms of making that employee experience better? What other areas stand out for you based on your lived experiences?
Yeah, well, I find that there's a lot of really cool tools out there that do employee surveys,
Hmm.
and some of them are better than others. But I find a lot of the time the questions are um, sort of very generic, and they can also be. It's kind of hard when you tell the team that the answers are anonymous, but there's only two people in the team. So it I think there's. I don't know what the improvement is, but this is definitely a cool product idea, potentially to add let's say automated intelligence into the mix. And I also love the idea of improving I know a lot of companies do OKRs.
Yeah.
I think there's something there too. I think there's something that's less rigid and less painful of a process that could be done now that we have transcripts, now that um, we have tools that we can almost like CRM type tools that we can share data with. I think there could be less of a heavy lift on those processes so they don't feel like an extra job on top of the work you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. And would you say HR teams don't have to go shopping and buy a new product or a tool? Now we have an opportunity if we can identify those friction points and barriers in an employee experience. There are lo-fi tools that, in partnership with the internal technology team, we can build ourselves to make it a better experience for employees.
So I generally look at existing tools before creating new ones because a
Mhm.
lot of the time if there's a tool that costs $20 a month that's going to do 90% of the job and we can connect it with an API to something else, great. Like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel because then you constantly need to update it and keep it, fresh. So I would say yes and no. I think there are opportunities to build your own things, but if your business is to do HR,
Yeah.
I would focus my energy on doing the things that you need to do with the tools that you have. And if something doesn't exist, that's an opportunity to build something new because the more you build, it's another job. You're adding another job on top of what you're doing.
Fair
It could
point.
also create new job opportunities within your company. There might be an HR operations specialist that
Yeah.
focuses on building AI tools, So there's different routes you can go.
Absolutely. And the reason I asked this question is because I worked on a project for a company where we found out that talent discovery was a big issue for them. Like, they're a professional services organization. They had to assemble, disassemble teams really quickly. And the only lens that they had to look at internal talent was through the lens of an org chart. And we all know org chart is not a good representation of what an employee brings to the table. And in this scenario, instead of buying a solution, what we ended up doing was building an internal talent marketplace, leveraging AI so that we could help the internal hiring managers discover talent quickly. So we used AI to parse skills of all employees. We built a recommendation engine by, asking AI to infer what does the skills in this job look like, and then match the skills.
That's awesome. I also think the challenge with like existing tools is sometimes they're made for a very specific use case and people try to bend them
Yeah.
to what they need them to do, and it's a huge time suck, right? You're just like you're like, why isn't this working? And you're like, it wasn't made to do that in the first place. That's when I think a custom solution also becomes really interesting. I also have to say this because this is something that I've always thought. The entire hiring process right now, I feel like putting custom CVs together for each job, writing letters, applying to, hundreds of jobs. The whole process is completely broken and a little
Yeah.
bit outdated. I'm just going to say it. So I think there is a problem to solve. I don't know if AI automated ATS solutions are the solution. I think there's probably something better, but I don't think anyone's cracked that yet. So that's a huge opportunity as well.
Yep. I totally agree with you. There's talent to opportunity matching is very, very broken right now.
Yeah. And like I also have to say, people are multidimensional, right? And
Mhm.
so if people are now optimizing their CVs to be exactly what's written on the job description, they become very one-dimensional. And so you end up with these like very generic, ridiculous CVs that have nothing to do with who the person is or how they actually solve problems or how they engage with the people in the company. And at the end of the day, that's the thing that's going to make them stand out. So I
Yeah.
find the whole thing kind of backwards.
What tips would you have as we wrap up our conversation today, Joel, for somebody who's curious and who wants to experiment sitting in HR, who might not have rich technical experience, to one, filter out the noise that you were talking about, and how to go about this journey? Like, where should they start? How should they feel like they are more confident to partner with the rest of the organization to augment, automate, or redesign whatever is their use case that they want to solve for?
So I would say try out some tools, just play.
Hmm.
Play, create something for a personal reason or to help you do something you do it all day, every day. Um, the other thing I would suggest is if you see somebody in your network that you trust, that you feel like is above board and is like, you could go to them for advice and you see that they're like into AI and they're taking courses, ask them for a course that you could take.
Hmm.
I find that just taking a course that you find online may not be the best idea. Getting a recommendation from somebody who you know and trust who's taken it could be interesting. And I would also say this, the challenge with a lot of the courses taught by or that you can find on Coursera or Udemy or that's taught by some of the bigger corporations or even universities, the information is all 90% already outdated. So the courses that I always recommend are the ones that are taught by actual practitioners. You may not get a perfect educational experience, but you will get some really practical learnings. You will get some examples of how to use it. You will get also build community because you'll have people in the course that you can connect with. So that's generally my top level advice. Play and educate yourself. And then from there, it's a matter of just practice.
Love it. So, where can people find you if they want to learn more?
For sure. Come see me on LinkedIn. No. But seriously, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me there, connect with me there. And I love to chat about all things AI and technology and growth and product and all obviously HR now too. So yes, I'd love to engage with your audience if they're interested.
Beautiful. I will add your LinkedIn in the description of this YouTube when it's published. Thank you, Joel, for your time.
Thanks so much, Feta. So nice to be on here today. Thanks for having me. And I love speaking with you about all things AI. Every time we chat, we go down so many rabbit holes. I love it.
Yeah, same here. To our audience, if today's conversation was useful, share it with someone in your network or organization who needs to hear it. That is how Tide reaches people it is made for. And you can find Tides on YouTube, Substack, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.